Role-playing games, or RPGs, play an important role in my own personal history of gaming. Because I never had a console of my own until I was 12, I only played games that my older brother had on his Super Nintendo. He had a fair collection of games, but by and away his favorite genre was the RPG. So in turn, I grew up playing these kinds of games at an age where I wasn't even supposed to understand what was going on. It's fair to say that this kind of gaming had an effect on me growing up. To this day, I still cannot shop for clothes without checking the text to see what stat boost they offer me. Remembering these veritable jewels wrapped in a cartridge was a nostalgic joy in of itself, and that's why it's also so nerve-wracking to compile them in a 10-spot list of the greatest RPGs the SNES had to offer. The usual rule applies here, only one entry per franchise. I'm Bennett the Sage, taking us on a walk down memory lane as I count down my top 10 best RPGs on the SNES.
Number 10.
Terranigma. If you know what this game is and you live in the United States, then pat yourself on the back for proving your fanboyism. For those of you not in the know, Terranigma was an action RPG released in Japan and the PAL countries back in 1995, but it never made its way over to the US. Shameful, considering it's one badass RPG that's both accessible and surprisingly deep. Set in the aftermath of a brutal war between heaven and hell, you play as Ark, on a quest to unify the underworld and the surface world, and resurrect the earth and all that live upon it. It's one of the very few games in its era that was steeped in Christian allusions, the obvious example being the main character himself, named after the ship that Noah used to save all life from the destructive floods. Perhaps US publishers didn't think that the American audience was ready for a game where you basically played God and resurrected the world. Or it could be that they were all just idiots that didn't know a good game if it bit them on their collective ass. Personally, I'm leaning towards the latter.
Number 9.
Illusion of Gaia. Released back in 1994, Illusion of Gaia can best be described as being like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, only with actual RPG elements. Playing as the very, very light-in-the-heels boy toy Will, it's up to you to save the Earth from a dead-on collision with a meteor. And when I say the Earth, I mean the actual Earth. Sure, it's an Earth where psychic powers and rifts between the space-time continuum exist, but it is the actual Earth, complete with real-life locations like the Pyramids of Egypt, the Nazca Lines in Peru, and even the Great Wall of China. Making the game even sweeter is the ability to change from the eternal pansy Will into the badass Dark Knight Frieden, and even the more badass Shadow. Sure, there were times in the game where it was pretty unclear how to progress the game, and it seemed like everyone around you was incompetent to the point of having to have someone wipe their butts for them. But none of that can hold back a great game like Illusion of Gaia. And for those of you who think I'm unfair against the uncomfortably androgynous Will, just know that I'm not the one who traipses around the world without wearing pants. Well, sober anyways.
Number 8.
Breath of Fire. Finally, a traditionally designed RPG makes its way onto the list at number 8. Breath of Fire is sort of like the middle child of the RPG family. It's underappreciated because of its apparent mediocrity. While Breath of Fire didn't do anything earth-shattering to the RPG formula, and played it rather to the book, it accomplished more than most games of the genre can only hope to do. You have a host of fun, interesting characters like Bo the Hunter or Nina the Winged Princess, you have a badass main protagonist that can transform into a dragon in battle, and you got blue hair. What more could you want from an RPG? While most agree that its sequel, the imaginatively titled Breath of Fire 2, was superior to the original in most ways, the prequel makes the list mainly because Breath of Fire does not have Sten in it. Ah, Sten, you creepy, creepy simian.
Number 7.
Secret of Evermore. Evermore here has the distinction of being the only American-made RPG to make it onto the list, and while that may seem like an impressive feat, it's mainly due to the fact that there are so few good American RPGs on the SNES. But that doesn't mean that Secret of Evermore is a bad game. Far from it. Borrowing the ring menu system and the combat system of its sister game, Secret of Mana, Evermore played like a single-player version of Mana, only instead of a hero destined to lift the curse of a holy sword, you're a boy trapped in the make-believe world of Evermore, where your only companion is man's best friend himself. Unfortunately, Secret of Evermore didn't sell very well, mainly because the American branch of publisher Squaresoft didn't back the game with appropriate press. That, and coupled together with the general disinterest that American gamers had with RPGs at the time. But make no mistake, if you get a chance to play this underappreciated gem, then by all means take it. If only more Americanized products of Japanese games came out as good as Secret of Evermore did. I'm looking at you, Mystic Quest.
Number 6.
Super Mario RPG. Who knew that gaming's leading man and poster child of platforming done right would make for such a great RPG? Handled by the experts at Squaresoft, Super Mario RPG may be the first platforming RPG ever made. The game not only brought the RPG chops that fans were expecting, but it also managed to feel like a true Mario game. Everything from fighting Mario's classic enemies to being able to use Mario's trademark power-ups in battle, it all falls into place and everything fits together. A bit light-hearted for some who were expecting a journey of epic proportions, but the carefree atmosphere does fit well into the overall feel of the game. Plus, where else outside of an LSD trip will you be able to see Mario fight with Bowser in a sentient gathering of clouds? Only in Super Mario RPG.
Number 5.
Ogre Battle, March of the Black Queen. Some may dispute that Ogre Battle may be more of a strategy game than an RPG game, but the way I see it, if Final Fantasy Tactics and Disgaea are considered RPGs, then so can Ogre Battle. Ogre Battle may have the deepest gameplay of any game on the SNES. There are so many factors that go into the game: alignment, choosing what classes to bring into battle, how merciless you are in battle, when battles take place, they all affect how you play the game. With a dozen different ways the game can end, each factor ends up determining if you overthrow the evil Zetajanon Empire and bring about an Age of Peace, or if you overthrow the evil empire just to implement your own reign of evil. Oh, and how cool is this? The game is named after 2 different songs by Queen on the second album. Taking names from one of the greatest rock bands in history? Bold move, but Ogre Battle has the chops to back it up.
Number 4.
Secret of Mana. Admittedly, I may have telegraphed this game's placement on this list poorly, but however, some of you may be calling shenanigans, since there's a 1 entry per franchise rule and I put Secret of Evermore at 7. And you would be right, if Squaresoft hadn't made it clear that Evermore was never intended to be a part of the Seiken Densetsu series, otherwise known as Secret of Mana here in the States. I don't call myself the Sage for shits and giggles. Now that we have that clarified, back to how much Secret of Mana rocks. Mana here can make even the most adamant RPG hater into a believer. Multiple weapons, 3-player co-op, incredible music, and the easy-to-use ring menu system all come together to bring a cohesive multiplayer experience to a genre that usually caters to a single-player experience. Dust off that second controller, Skippy, because as good as Secret of Mana is alone, it's infinitely much better having a friend with you to yell at for wasting the last fairy nut. Because what else are friends for?
Number 3.
Earthbound. Most people's depiction of a typical RPG is a brooding, emo-centric story featuring men who look like women and impossibly coiffed hairstyles. In comes Earthbound to kick that misconception in the ass. What other RPG has you fighting hippies, old ladies, and viscous piles of puke? None, that's what. As the precocious little Ness, your love of baseball and juicy steaks is only dwarfed by your cosmic-altering psychic abilities. You must travel the world in search of the 8 sanctuaries to receive the necessary powers to defeat Gygas, an extraterrestrial being bent on destroying your world. Everything about Earthbound is a send-up of both RPG conventions and American pop culture. There are more pop culture references in this game than an entire season of Family Guy. Oh, almost, rather. It's sad that games like this are rare and few in between. Gaming needs a good kick in the ass every now and then, and Earthbound is all but proud to put on its ass-kicking boots.
Number 2.
Final Fantasy II/4. It may not have the following that FF6 has, but I believe that FF4 may be the most underrated RPG of all time. Simply put, everything about this game is quality, quality, quality. As the Dark Knight Cecil, you are ordered by your king to collect the crystals of nearby kingdoms, and kill anyone getting in your way. Realizing that your king is no longer the man he once was, it's up to you and your fellow compatriots to find out the dirty secrets that your king has been hiding. Games just didn't have plots like this back in the day. Stories that dealt with grandiose subjects of betrayal, redemption, and forgiveness. Also, FF4 was the first Final Fantasy game to feature the active time battle event system, which meant you had to change your strategy in battle the very instant the event activates, or your party would not survive the battle. If there was any doubt left over the game's place on this list, know that this is the game that Spoony got his namesake from. God bless you, poorly translated English.
Number 1.
Chrono Trigger. Was there any doubt in your mind that this was the greatest RPG on the SNES? Any at all? Not only is it the best RPG on the SNES, it may be the best RPG of all time. It's a game that demands your attention, and it will not let go of it until the final credits roll. It has everything a game could ever need. A well fleshed out cast, devastating moves and combos, time travel, some of the greatest music ever on the system, an epic story, memorable villains, multiple endings, and a bisexual cave woman. If you had never picked up Chrono Trigger and experienced its greatness, then saying you're missing out would be the understatement of the century. You owe it to yourself to play this game. Even if you detest RPGs with all of your being, this game would be the one exception that proves the rule. Hats off to you, Chrono Trigger, for being the greatest RPG to ever grace the Super Nintendo.